Before we begin talking about graphing lines, which is mainly what this module is about, we need to explore the idea of slope. Everyone has gone up or down a ramp before, and you know that some ramps are steeper than others. The word slope is a synonym for the word steepness and is used in math all the time. On the grid below, you can see that I have two different points. I am going to draw a line between those points so we can explore the slope of that particular line. As I said before, the slope of a line is really its steepness. So we need to figure out how steep this line is. The steepness or slope of a line is a comparison of its change in height compared to its change in distance. In math, we say the change in y compared to the change in x. So the slope of this particular line, I am going to figure that out by figuring out how much higher one point is than the other point is. So it changes 1, and I have to go over 1, 2, 3, 4. So the slope of this particular line is given the numerical value 1/4. Notice that this is a positive sloped line because to get from this point to the next point, first I went up 1, which is positive, and then I went to the right 4, which is also positive. So both of these are positive numbers, so I have a positive slope. Here's another example. Remember that slope is the change in y compared to the change in x. So if I want to figure out how much this line changes, first of all I'm going to figure out the change in y. It goes up 4, and it goes over 1 to the right. Once again, this is positive and positive. So my slope is 4 over 1. But of course, it could also just be written, since 4 divided by 1 is equal to 4, the slope of this line is just 4. Here's another example. In order to find the slope of this line, once again, I need to know what the change in y is compared to the change in x. So if I wanted to, I could start at the top point and I'm going to go down. And when I go down, I'm going to have to go down 7. But notice I'm going down, so my change in y is a -7, and my change in x, I'm going to go over 3. But notice I'm going in the positive direction, 3. So the slope of this particular line is -7/3, and it is a negatively sloped line. If you are wondering whether it matters which point you start with, it really does not matter. So I'm going to figure out the slope of this line by starting with the other point. This time, I have to go up 7 to get from the bottom point to the other point. And going up 7, I am going in a positive direction, so that is 7. But then to get to the other point, I have to go to the left 3. So that is a -3. 7 divided by a -3 still gives you a slope, a negative slope of a -7/3. So it doesn't matter which point you start with to get to the other point, you will get the same slope each time. There are a couple of important ideas then associated with slope that you need to know. I am drawing a number of lines here, and I want you to notice that all these lines, as you look at them from left to right, are increasing. And because of that, all of these lines have what's known as a positive slope. So as you look at a line, you are going to know right away if it is a positive sloped line because all of those lines are increasing as you go from left to right. At the same time, if you have lines that are going downwards from left to right, those all have a negative sloped line. So it's very easy to tell if a line has a negative sloped line or a positive sloped line just by taking a look at which way it is going, as you are looking at it from left to right. So that brings us to the question of horizontal lines and vertical lines. You can see that I have a horizontal line drawn here. And once again, we could figure out its slope. In order to get from one point to another point, say from this point to this point, the change in y is 0. The change in x in this particular case is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it is 0 over 6. Anything that has 0 in the numerator, it's 0 over 6, the slope of this is 0. So we say that the slope of a horizontal line is always equal to 0. In other words, it has no slope. In the lower left quadrant, I've drawn a vertical line. And once again, we can go through and figure out what the slope is of that line. The change in y in this particular case is equal to 3 as it goes up 3 to get from one point to another point. However, this time the change in x is 0. It does not change at all. So the slope of this, anything that is divided by 0, we say it is an undefined slope. So we can't say that this has a slope of 0. We just say that this slope is undefined. For practice, I've drawn two different lines on this grid. I'd like you to compute the slopes of these two different lines, and then you can turn this back on again and see whether or not you agree with my thinking. Okay, hopefully you've had enough time to compute the slopes. Here's my thinking. As I take a look at the top line, I see that it is a positive sloped line. I know it's positive because it's going up as I look at from left to right. The slope of this particular line, I would need to go up 1, and I need to go over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So going up 1 and over 5, I say that the slope of this particular line is a positive 1 over 5. The line at the bottom I know is a negative sloped line because as I look at it from left to right, it is going down. In order to get from one point to another, the change in y is I am going down 3. So it is a negative 3, and I am going to the right 2, so it is a positive 2. So the slope of this particular line is a negative 3 over 2, or negative 3/2. The purpose of this video on slope was to give you some additional knowledge before starting to graph equations, which is what we will be doing in the rest of this module. If you are interested in having more practice on determining slopes of lines, look for a link to a website found in this module.